Hi, everyone. I'm Richard Roberts. I'm the resident dramaturg at the Indiana Repertory Theater. Thank you so much for joining us today for this Backstage Chat. We are joined by Jessica Huang, who is the playwright of The Paper Dreams of Harry Chin. This is a play that we intended to produce 2 years ago, and we were in rehearsal right up to the point of going to tech when we had to close the theater because of COVID. And we're very, very excited that we're now doing the play again. The cast is in rehearsal, and we're going to open very soon. And we're here with Jessica today to talk about the play. Jessica, I want to ask you, which came first for you, theater or writing?
I would have to say writing, and actually before writing, reading. I was a pretty dorky kid, and I was really into reading, like reading fantasy. I never really went without a book, and so
sounds like my childhood.
Yeah, yeah. It was only natural that at some point I would start writing, and then very quickly I was drawn to theater after that.
And how did you get into theater?
I had a pretty amazing 6th grade teacher who was a part of the community theater in our area, and our community theater is a family theater. So the organization is the Chaska Valley Family Theater, and they sort of prioritized working, bringing in, parents and children and having an activity that the family could do together. So my teacher recognized my flair for the dramatic and invited me to audition. And yeah, then I brought my whole family with me, and we were all a part of that theater for a long time.
That's lovely. That's awesome. So how did you decide to combine those two things and become a playwright?
I loved theater, and I loved writing separately, and I went to school for journalism and graduated and worked as a journalist for like 6 months. But that whole time, when I was in college, I was really missing the community that I had built in my high school drama department. And though I'm not a good actor, I really loved being a part of plays. And so I auditioned for a play at my college, and it was a new play, and it was sort of opened the world of new plays, playwriting, the like living process of creating theater. Because up until that point, I had only done, Shakespeare and I don't know, Shakespeare and like the canonical writers. But working on that project, I was working as an actor, and then I was sort of ushered into the new play community at my college, where we met every Tuesday.
How awesome!
And read each other's plays. It was very quick. I very quickly found my calling then.
That's great. Talk about how your Chinese Jewish heritage affects your work as an artist.
Yeah, I mean, the first answer that I have for that is that my experience being Chinese and Jewish and American in Minnesota, at the time, at least in the community that I grew up in, it was pretty homogenous and pretty Scandinavian. So not just Caucasian, but blonde, blue-eyed, beautiful, like tall, gorgeous, beautiful, blonde people. And I never really felt like I fit into that mold. And so I had this, experience being like different and other than the community where I was. And not being wholly anything was also really pivotal for me. Just feeling like I was not quite Chinese, not quite Jewish, not quite like, not at all Scandinavian like my friends were. So coming from that sort of intersection of like being not a lot of things, that is usually where my work begins. People struggling with being outside of a outside of some mainstream story. And those are the people I'm interested in telling their stories, looking at their experiences.
What a great way to use that experience. The Paper News of Harry Chin is about a real person, but the historical event that's sort of behind the Harry Chin story is the Chinese Exclusion Act, which is a big part of American history that I knew nothing about until you read your play. And I've talked to a lot of people who have said they knew nothing about it until we started working on this play. How did you first learn about the Chinese Exclusion Act?
I don't actually know. It wasn't in school. I suspect, there was a time period where I was just sort of hungrily consuming as much Asian American history as I possibly could. And like usual, my entry point is novels. So like a very pivotal novel that I read was Maxine Hong Kingston's Warrior Woman in Search of Ghosts. And that really references the Chinese exclusion era, certainly from the perspective of women immigrants and women who are left in China. And so I guess all I can say is that it crept into my awareness in bits and pieces, and eventually I came to know that that a lot of these stories of Chinese people immigrating illegally or finding their way to the country and being having to establish themselves in a circumstance that felt like dangerous or not supported by the government in some ways. Slowly that like amassed itself into understanding, there was a period of law that caused that. It wasn't just any old immigration story, though there are so many resonances between a lot of immigration stories, but it was a specific period of history that had to do with specific laws about Chinese people. And so if that makes sense, it was sort of like inside out, I learned about it. And then I do remember being in my apartment and like putting all of the pieces together and feeling very compelled to write a play about that, because that sort of profound feeling of understanding and like dismay, but also sort of like, all of that finally makes sense, that feeling. I felt like I needed to like do something about it. I wanted to talk about that more.
So talk about how that impulse got channeled into this particular play about this particular real person, Harry Chin.
So after that, in that same moment, maybe, I started doing a little research, and in Minnesota, there's this beautiful resource, the Minnesota Historical Society, and they have a beautiful collection of oral histories. And so as I was digging around, learning about the Chinese exclusion era, learning about paper sons, that there's this group of sort of like grouping of people that bought documentation that was not their identity, but bought new paper identities that helped them immigrate. I stumbled upon a Minnesota story that was in the oral history archives, and then in listening to that, it just felt like that was the play. Harry gave his oral history, and then Sheila also gave hers. And so, and even in Harry's oral history, you can hear her, sitting beside him. And
Sheila is Harry's daughter.
Yeah, Sheila's Harry's daughter. And that relationship, the generational experience, what Harry's talking about and what Sheila's talking about, the family story, all of that started to really take shape, and it felt like exactly what I needed to write about.
And then am I correct in thinking there was a commission from the History Theater?
Yeah, yep. Yeah, the History Theater in St. Paul has a mission to tell real stories about real people that have some connection to Minnesota and the Midwest. And yeah, and so we've been thinking about, batting, like not even really, just like talking about having a project together. And this was the one that I brought to them as the one that I wanted to see if they were interested in pursuing. And they were great. They absolutely said yes.
I'm so glad they did.
Yeah, me
And
too.
I'm so glad we're able to do the second production of the play. It's really, I know second productions are so important to playwrights, because once you get past the premiere, the second production can be very hard.
It really can be. And I learned so much in the premiere, and you want, as a playwright, to have the opportunity to implement all of that learning and see the play sort of move toward its ultimate phase.
Well, we're happy to be a part of that. Tell me, how did you develop the play's structure of skipping around through time and space? And how did you develop the style of, for lack of a better term, sort of magical realism? And how are those two things intertwined in your work?
Yeah. Well, so in terms of like its structure, it felt like a memory play, or it felt like the best way to tell the story of one man's life is to explore his memories. And I was really interested in the ways that my memories surface for me, which is, there's some trigger and I remember this one thing, and then remembering that makes me remember something else. And there is no linear logic to it. It's more thematic and emotional. And so that felt like the best structure to play with for this story. And then in terms of its magic realism, I mean, the more I think about this play and the more I describe it, it's really specifically about haunting, and that's the intrusion of like the supernatural or the magic into the real is a haunting, which is sometimes what those memories are like. You go down that spiral and suddenly you're in some really dark places that haunt you, and Harry has a lot to be haunted by. So why not let him have those ghosts?
So I love that some of the characters in the play are ghosts, and that plays into the Chinese traditions about ghosts. And there are so many wonderful layers in the play. It's really great. What would you like audiences to take away from the play when they've seen it?
It's a very simple thing, but I think, the word hero has a picture in a lot of our minds, like who a hero is, who gets to go on a hero's journey. And I really want to inspire the idea or the notion that the man working in the back of the kitchen, or doing the laundry at the laundromat, or driving a taxi or whatever, these immigrants who for some of us intrude on our lives or intersect with us for just short periods of time, that they are heroes. They can have a whole hero's journey and go to the mouth of Hades and come back with the elixir, and have the whole Joseph Campbell journey that we really attribute to like the Greek heroes of old. But there are people who walk among us who have some pretty incredible stories, full of incredible challenges and triumphs and disasters. And those stories make our world richer.
That's a really beautiful and moving idea. Thank you so much, Jessica. Thank you for talking with us today. Thank you, everyone, for listening to us. And please come to the IRT to see The Paper Dreams of Harry Chin by Jessica Huang. It's a very theatrical, very exciting, very moving journey, and we don't want you to miss it. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.